is Max Anderson, and as Jeff Haanen so kindly reminded me, I did give the wrong name to this conference 10 years ago. So thank you, Jeff. I am also, in addition to that, the CEO and co-founder of Saturn Five, and I'm delighted to be here. I got to speak at the first conference 10 years ago, and it's amazing how far it's come. And so congratulations to the whole team. There's a lot I want to share with you. I'll try to go fast. When I was in high school and college, I thought my life would look like this. Maybe a little more up and to the right is how I thought I should draw it. In reality, it's felt more like this. I was born here in Denver. I grew up in Lakewood. That's my mom with me, looking tired because I was such an alert and active baby. That's my dad and my sister. And here my family is a picture from a couple of years ago. But when I was their age, I used to really look up to my grandfather, Elwood, who was a turkey and almond farmer in the Central Valley of California. And I thought he was the greatest person. I wanted to be like him when I grew up. I wasn't sure I wanted to be a turkey and almond farmer, though. I thought maybe I wanted to be an actor. That's me as the Scarecrow in the Creighton Middle School production of The Wizard of Oz. And I went on from there to Princeton, where I studied history, I met my wife, and I grew deeply in my faith. I also learned about a different career path than I had ever heard of before, management consulting. After graduating, I joined McKinsey & Company. I moved to New York City, and I started helping financial institutions become more profitable. This is the part where some of you are thinking, man, this is getting really dark. But I love New York. I didn't love consulting, though. I felt like I wasn't maybe using my God-given gifts to the way that I could really worship Him the best, that maybe I was leaving something on the table, that maybe I should do something more spiritual. I thought maybe I should become a pastor. So I left McKinsey. I'm the only one in my Anna's class that did this, and went to join a church. I started working with Tim Keller at Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York, and was studying to become an urban church planter. And a funny thing happened. I was there, and Tim taught me so much about the gospel, but he also taught me about work. And he said it is really a lie to think that the highest form of spiritual calling is to be a pastor. And then just below that is to be in a nonprofit, and way below that is to be in business. He said, actually, God made all of work for His glory. I said, even business? He said, yes. I said, well, let's go. And I went to Harvard Business School, and I loved it. I interned at Google. I got a job at a hedge fund after graduation. But this was a weird time. It was the global financial crisis. I graduated in 2009. And MBAs were not popular at that point. I read one article saying that, Harvard Business School was producing the next Darth Vaders of the economy. And I was like, geez, this is terrible. And it wasn't certainly how I experienced my classmates or what, their dreams were or my own. And I said, let's make a symbolic statement about how we want to live differently. And so we came up with this idea of creating like a pledge or an oath, like a Hippocratic oath, but for managers. We called it the MBA oath, and the idea essentially was to create value responsibly, to think about the different stakeholders in a business's organization, from the owners to the employees, to the customers, the vendors, the community around. And it got some traction. 2/3 of our class signed this pledge. Some kids at some other business schools heard about it. They asked if they could do it too. Long story short, thousands of MBAs around the world, hundreds of business schools did this, and we got covered in all these news outlets, from the New York Times to John Oliver did a segment for The Daily Show. I was like, wow, we've really made it. I got a call from Penguin and ended up writing a book about it. And I was so excited to take these ideas into my next professional step, which was to work for this guy, Ray Dalio, who founded Bridgewater Associates, which is the world's largest hedge fund. And if you haven't been following the talk now, I'll refer you back to this squiggly line. Turkey farmer, management consultant, pastor, MBA, author, hedge fund. I was thrashing about and I felt inadequate because I felt like, gosh, why am I not understanding what God has laid out for me? Why am I going all these different ways? I was all over the place. I was looking for my calling. But I was at Bridgewater, and I realized a couple of things. First is that our calling is not something that God is hiding from us. Our calling is very clear, and that's to love him with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and it is to love our neighbors as ourselves. And we can do that at a hedge fund or at a church or on a turkey ranch. The other thing that made an influence on me was I came across this quote by Annie Dillard, who said, "How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives." How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. And I think that's so true. And for me, my days were beginning at leaving the house at 6 a.m. to do a long commute from Manhattan up to Connecticut, and then not getting home off until 10 o'clock or midnight. And I was like, I don't know if this is the way that God really wants me to love him and other people. Not because it's bad, but because I just have nothing left. I wanted to have more times like this. And so I left. And the first thing I did was I started writing. I created a newsletter called The Weekend Reader, and where I covered topics in culture and theology and technology. The second thing I did was I joined a group called Praxis, which the Denver Institute has a partnership with, whose mission is to help entrepreneurs who are motivated by their faith start new redemptive ventures. And while I was mentoring some entrepreneurs in this program, I made a friend named Evan Loomis, who was also doing the same thing. And we really enjoyed each other. We enjoyed working together, and we had a similar view of what we wanted to do. And we said, let's go into business together, and we created a company. That's called Saturn Five. Saturn Five is an investment firm, and basically what we do is buy boring businesses from old people. Which isn't completely fair because some of the businesses are not boring and some of the people are not old, but by and large, there are more than 10 million small business owners who are 55 or older, and a lot of them are looking to exit. And what are they going to do when they do that? Are they going to shut the business down, pass it on to their kids or employees, or find someone to sell to? We wanted to be a group that they would trust to sell to. And so we started buying companies. This is me with Dave Stefanich, who owned All Demolition Excavating Company. I like businesses where you know what they do in the title of the business. Our first acquisition was a company called Concrete Curb and Paving. Do you know what they do? Taylor's in the room. But we're kind of like a poor man's Berkshire Hathaway. We've been acquiring controlling stakes in businesses, first only in Denver, then across Colorado, and now across the country. And over the last 9 years, we have a portfolio now of 25 companies that employ 1,700 people, and last year did $400 million in sales. I feel like for the first time, this is my calling. Not because it's turning out to seem like it's going to succeed, or because we're making money, but because I feel like it is a mixture of the things that God has prepared me to do through my past experiences where I can love him and love other people more. If you're wondering what it's like to discover your calling, in the process of it, I'd say it feels like this. And when you look backwards, it can start to feel like this. I'm supposed to talk to you about the practices of mercy-shaped businesses. And I just want to acknowledge that like being up here is a big temptation toward pride. And I'm reminded of Jesus' story of the Pharisee and the tax collector. The tax collector, it was in the back of the temple. The Pharisee goes to the front, prays very loudly and says, "Thank you, God, that I'm not like these other people, these robbers and bandits. I give 10%. I fast twice a week." He was a good person, but he wanted everyone to know it. Meanwhile, the tax collector stood in the back of the temple and beat his breast and said, "Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner." And Jesus said, only one of these is justified before God. And it is not the guy who is doing the good works. It was the tax collector who came in humility and said, "I need your mercy." And so what is a mercy-shaped business? My conclusion is that a mercy-shaped business has to be a business that is shaped by the reality of God's mercy. That, as Jeff said, we are not necessarily the Good Samaritan. We first must see ourselves as the man who's beaten, and naked, and ashamed at the side of the road. But a Samaritan from Nazareth came along and lived the life we should have lived and died the death for us that we should die, so that we might, in response to that mercy, show mercy to others. Now that's pretty simple. And if I was from a different faith tradition, I would say just go and do likewise. Let the Spirit lead and do good things, whatever it leads. But I'm not from that tradition. I'm a Presbyterian. Which means I feel compelled to overthink it, and if possible, come up with an overly complex theological framework for response, which I have done. I think you could insert your job title or your industry on top of this page and think about it for yourself, but in 3 lenses of what is the intent, execution, and outcome of what I'm doing. The intent, what am I trying to do? What's the goal? The execution, how is it being done? And the outcome, what are the actual results, regardless of what the original intent was? And then you can complicate it further by thinking through a lens of creation, fall, and redemption. Creation. How does this thing represent God's goodness and his eternal purpose? Fall, in what ways is sin breaking this industry or this job? And what false idols exist that I'm tempted to worship? Redemption, how can I respond to the mercy of God by thinking creatively and mercifully for others? So I've thought this through for our line of work in private company investing. I'd like to take you through every one of these bullet points. Just kidding. You can take a picture if you want. It doesn't matter almost what's up here for me particularly, but I'll share just a couple of vignettes as an example. It's again, it's not that I've got it right or that what's right for investing is right for if you're a hotel manager or a nursery school owner. But let's just go through creation. Our intent in private company investing is to create returns for our investors by building and stewarding companies that create value for people. So companies is a good word. The word company, the etymology is from the Latin roots cum and panis. Cum means with, panis means bread, so with bread, or put more artfully, a company is a group of people who eat together. And it's not just a supper club, of course, they're on a mission. It's a group of people who eat together and are on a mission. This is our company, what it looks like when we gather in the summer and we do strategic planning. We enjoy good wine and great food. And we think about how we can do our mission together, whether that is installing HVAC systems or taking people on dog sledding rides or laying concrete or launching new sparkling waters. Those are good things. But they, like everything else, are subject to the fall. And private equity, I would say, doesn't have the best reputation. And so you've got to think, well, what are the reasons for that? And I think you could look at, does this industry look at people as cost centers rather than drivers of value? Is there an incentive to take excessive risk? There is a structure within private equity, the fund, which is a 10-year fund life, where firms raise money from investors. They then have a few years to invest the money, a few years to run the company, then a few years to sell the company on to the next buyer. So in a sense, they're almost like renting the company instead of owning it. And when you have a rental car instead of a car you own, you treat it differently. And it's had a lot of negative effects that have hurt a lot of people. And so we thought, when we're starting our investment firm, can we think differently? Can we think in a redemptive way, have a mercy-filled response? What would it be like if we treated people as eternal, made in the image of God? How can we manage risk wisely? How can we have a long-term structure that helps us think with not just a short-term mindset? And I'll just quickly say a couple of examples of what that looks like in our experience. So we decided to set up funds that don't have sunset dates. They're permanent capital, which allows us to have a longer-term outlook and make hopefully long-term decisions for companies. It allows us to respond in mercy because we've been given mercy, to be less afraid of sharing bad news with investors, but to be honest and straightforward in a way that builds trust for the long term. It allows us to be really deeply invested in what the companies themselves are excited about. This is me at our company, All Demolition. One of the things we do is we crush concrete and we resell the gravel. And I'm there with Merle, our mechanic, Tanya, our general manager, Scotty, who runs the crushing machine. This is a new crushing machine. It cost $1 million. We saved up for several years, so we're all smiling because we did this together. And that's an exciting thing, to be on mission together. At that same company, we had a Christmas party the first year we owned it. And I went around talking to the employees and I said, "What are you doing for Christmas this year?" And I'd say a full third of them answered that with really no plans at all. They weren't going to be with family. They weren't going to be with friends. They were just going to be watching TV and ordering a pizza. And I thought, my goodness, this is not just people who are coming for a paycheck. We are their community. We have the chance to be their company. And what can that look like? It can look a little bit like this. So this will be my last story. This is Molly, who works with me. She was a 5280 fellow on the right, and Leo on the left was our CFO. Leo's a farm boy from Minnesota, one of 11 kids, and he typified Midwestern values: honest, hardworking, humble. A couple years into working with us, Leo was diagnosed with cancer, and it had spread very quickly. He kept working because he wanted to. But when it came to the end, on his last day on earth, our team went and joined his family at his bedside. And we stood there and we prayed and we cried and we hugged and we laughed about old stories. And we got to help be there in some of his final moments before leaving this world. And it felt so right to be there at that time. But also in retrospect, I know it sounds so weird. A private equity firm, like, do you want the people you work with there at your bedside when you're dying? But we weren't just in business together. We were in a company together. We were those who ate together. And we perceived ourselves as on a mission together. And that mission was to learn how to love one another and love God. Last point, rest. Point 7, God rested on the seventh day. Pretty good, right? I want to live on the right-hand side of this chart. I want everything we do to be that creative and that merciful. The truth is, we're totally imperfect and totally failing. And we're still the guy on the side of the road. I'm ashamed of how much we could be doing when I hear some of the stories that are so inspiring today. And I'm excited about it. And it's just a reminder, again, I still need a Savior. We still do. But I have a great hope. And that hope is that whatever squiggles our companies look like and our lives take, we can think like Paul, who said, now we see dimly as through a mirror, then we will see fully. Now I know in part, and I'm known in part, and then I shall know fully, as I'll be fully known. And we'll see that God, in his great goodness, takes all the things of our life, the things we don't understand or confusing at the time, and weaves them together in a beautiful way for his glory, for the sake of teaching us how to love, to give us the chance to practice mercy, and to bring us again to our Father, who loves us immeasurably more than we can imagine.